Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to be here amongst the Audubon Society of Rhode Island once again. I am Mayor Allan Fung, proud mayor of now our state's second largest city for the past 9.5 years. And you might be sitting here wondering, well, as a Republican, those dastardly Republicans, don't care about the environment. I can tell you that's absolutely not true. And I can back that up by what I believe in, what I've done in our great city of Cranston. But before I even get into that, I want to let you know a little bit about myself, because I'll put not only my track record against our governor or any of the other candidates that are going to appear before you, but the environment is something that's important to myself and my wife. In fact, my wife was a member of the Sierra Club, and we enjoy traveling, enjoy a lot of our national parks, going to Bryce Canyon or Zion. Those are a lot of how we enjoy a lot of activities across the country. But most importantly, even in our own local backyards, all that Rhode Island has to offer, outside of just the great oceans, looking out into the bay here, outside of where we are at the Squantum Club, my wife and I love walks at Statuus, that wildlife preserve, all that it has to offer. And there are little pockets and little jewels all throughout the state that have to be preserved, restored, and dollars invested. That's who I am, that's who my wife is, and that's what we enjoy, the natural beauty of all that we have to offer in our state and in our country. But outside of that, I am proud of my record in Cranston. And a lot of those initiatives that I've done in the city, working alongside with many of my department heads, but also our council, to help improve our city is something that I will take to the state level. Because there, as we all know, in our own backyards, in our cities and towns, there are man-made conditions through past poor planning that have contributed to a lot of effects that have impacted our local communities as well as our state. And many of you have probably heard what happened in 2010 when we had some of the worst flooding in our state's lifetime, in our city's lifetime, when half of my city was underwater. Well, a lot of it was also because of overdevelopment in areas where homes probably shouldn't have been built. But now we have learned many of those lessons, and I'm proud to have worked not only during those floods to ensure that no one was hurt, but most importantly, ensure that we as a city worked with those residents to buy them out, working with the state, working with our federal government to get some of our dollars to preserve and make sure that we restore all those homes back to the natural floodplain. Now, I'm also proud of working in that Edgewood side of Cranston, which you can probably see right across the bay, with many of our community groups to take some of those dollars from the state to make sure that we invest it back to, with working at Stillhouse Cove, to preserve Stillhouse Cove. We have to invest a lot more of those dollars and keep a lot of those dollars flowing. And as far as, outside of just, restoring those floodplains, restoring that, I've made a commitment to open space, also to preserving our farmlands. I'm proud of, buying the farming rights to Moreau Farm on the western side so it doesn't get overdeveloped. We're not just lopping down trees for more homes. Those are some of the investments we have to continue and strategically place in each of our own backyards. But I've also made a commitment to renewable energy, but doing it so that it doesn't have an overburdening impact on our city of Cranston. And a lot of what I see as problematic throughout the state is a lack of local control, local decision-making sometimes, and what is being put in our backyards. In Cranston, we chose solar. And right now we have one of the largest solar projects going on in the city. And that's a commitment that we've made to push a renewable energy incentive throughout our state, throughout our city, and hopefully expand it throughout the state. And we're looking at possibly upwards of 2 more projects to help add more energy into the grid. But these are the commitments that we have made in the city that I hope to expand upon as your next governor. And that's why I'm proud to ask for your support, because we have a lot of issues throughout the state, in every community, in every one of our own backyards. But it's how we get there and how we should do it. You know, I'm proud that we chose solar, and I've seen that other municipalities have made other decisions. Johnson next door to me, Portsmouth have chose wind. But those type of decisions really need to be made with that local input in mind, particularly with respect to whatever impacts it might have on its residents. You know, as governor, I will ensure that we have standards, not necessarily mandates, but standards and benchmarks that are appropriate, that we all feel appropriate with your input, with the input of all the different stakeholders and providers to ensure that it's right for everyone. Because we can't, what's right in Cranston is not going to be the same as what's going on in Aquidneck Island, where my wife has come from, to what's going on up in Burrillville. And that's what we have to make sure we invest in, because a lot of times we're seeing a lot more commitment still, especially under this administration, to fossil fuels. And I know one of the questions that are on everyone's mind is what's going on up in Burrillville. I feel that that process right now up in Burrillville is backwards. It's wrong, and to take it out, and I'm a strong proponent of local control, local decision making, but the way that it's getting the voices of the Burrillville residents are taking out of that process and having that Invernergy power plant shoved down their throats without local input and making it a decision only at the state level is wrong. And now I'm speaking from that perspective, not only as someone who is a local resident, but as a local mayor. Residents should have that say. Residents should have that, especially when they already have a power plant in their backyard. But most importantly, my decisions aren't going to be governed, like this current administration, by the dollars. We've seen why the governor has taken a step back on that. I'm not. I am going up to Burrillville, you know, and speaking my mind and standing by those Burrillville residents. You know, the governor's had not only dollars put into her campaign contributions, but also we saw the Democratic governors, you know, get a $50,000 contribution from Invernergy for these negative ads that want to distort my record of who I stand for and what I believe in. And I want to also clear up one other issue that's been said about me negatively, about I don't care about environment, that I want to drill out into our, you know, coastline. That's false. You know, unless the governor can tell me, or her campaign can say that our Earth's crust has changed that much since this last discussion had, come forward 30, 40 years ago, I don't believe in that. I believe in a clean water strategy. I believe in making sure we have open space, and we need to invest the dollars into our local communities to provide a decisive strategy to help continue to preserve what we have in our state, but most importantly, make a commitment to renewable energies, but making sure that there is local control at every step of that process, so it's not forced into our own backyards without at least our input and say. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I would love to answer any questions that anyone else has.
All right. The question that from the people in the audience or people from home, what are the most pressing environmental?
I think there are two real, environmental issues, some of which aren't even being talked about yet. Lead in our waters is something that has been a big concern of myself. I know our governor's been focusing a lot on infrastructure. Well, infrastructure doesn't always just necessarily mean, our roadways, bridges, or even our schools. Those are all critically important aspects. But what we also have to continue to do is making sure that our drinking waters is safe. There's a lot of infrastructure that really needs to be done. I know Providence Water is starting a lot of the lead replacements, but we have to continue to work with them in all of our local communities where they service, or any of the other water authorities, to ensure that our infrastructure is safe. That is one of the challenges that I will continue to work with, try to find more additional dollars to improve not only our infrastructures from our roadways, but most importantly, other areas And that's one of the areas that I'd focus on, and especially in a city like Providence, where you have a lot more older infrastructure, they really have a bigger need, especially with a lot of the children that are involved. And I grew up in Providence in that backyard.
What about climate change issues? How would you address those? What are the most pressing ones? There's a whole ton of different climate change issues. What are the most
One of the biggest ones that I would continue to focus on, as far as controlling as a gubernatorial, as governor, is making sure that continue to not build where we shouldn't be. When we have a lot of building going on, a lot of modern construction, we really have to make sure that the newer construction meets with a lot more, not only energy efficiency, LEED type building certifications, so that it's becoming a lot more green and helping us out, but also in any type of preservation that we have, like what we've done in Cranston, not build where we're not supposed to, provide more mixed-use type developments, transit-oriented type developments, so it's not a bigger reliance on driving to work and all these different types of long-distance spaces, because that's part of the problem that I see in Rhode Island, is making sure that, families that have 1, 2, or even 3 cars, and each one drives on their own in their daily commute, if we can provide spaces, mixed-use type developments where it has a right combination of the commercial aspect, industrial, but workforce housing, appropriate bike lanes to, plan appropriately to build out communities and do that on a long-term basis, I think that can help, mitigate some of those additional carbon emissions if we do it on a holistic view.
What about the, you mentioned a little bit in your remarks, utility scale solar is a big thing now, as Larry also mentioned in his talk. How do you address that? I mean, there's so many issues involved with the property rights, interconnection.
No, I think that's why at least having benchmarks at the state level, not mandates, because that's one of the things that I am opposed to, any type of mandates from the state. But if you set appropriate benchmarks with whether it's solar, whether it's with wind, or how you site locate where you do it and the interconnections into it, I think that's something that we can control at the state level, setting a lot of these guidelines out. So that as communities consider any of the different projects that are going to come before them, that there is that opportunity to do it in the right way with the least amount of impact on our environment.
How do you feel about offshore wind? I know in 2014 you were kind of against the Rock Island wind farm. What do you believe?
I still have some concerns on offshore wind. I posed it, back in 2014. One of the biggest concerns that I have is the impact that adding a lot more of those wind farms out in the ocean ways is going to have on our fishing community. I've talked to a lot of the people down in Galilee, a lot of Narragansett, and even all where they're fishing all throughout. A lot of the boat captains are struggling getting through a lot of those channels, and it's having an impact on their, ability to navigate through. They are also worried about the long-term impacts to what it's going to be doing to the fishing beds. And particularly, I've talked a lot to the squid fishing industry that's here in Rhode Island, which is, our state appetizer. They are really worried about the impacts when you're going down that deep into those beds.
And what about, have you heard from farmers that are concerned about, it's a different animal, but farmers that would, it's kind of their decision if they're going to lose farmland for solar, but have you heard any concerns on, well, fishermen might be impacted by offshore wind? What about our farmland? We're trying to get more local food, but we're also...
Yeah. And on farmland, that's why, I am a proponent of making sure that, if we can buy out the development rights for a lot of farmers, just like what I did with Moreau Farm in Cranston, they can farm at peace and make sure that they have the sufficient dollars without, it's difficult. We are losing more farms in this state, as I've crisscrossed the state from the East Bay to even on the western side. It is a bigger struggle. So if the opportunity at the local level or the state level to buy out some of those farming rights, I think it's something we should invest those dollars to do it and preserve farming for any individuals, but also give them some flexibility. One of the things that I have seen work and this is with Confreda Farms in Cranston. They've had some accommodation business that comes off from their farming that provide a lot of family-friendly activities so that they can keep, their farm going year-round. So I would support any type of initiatives that would allow them some flexibility to keep going year-round.
My name is Joe Trillo. I was a 16-year state representative representing the city of Warwick. And a lot has happened in the 16 years since I originally was elected to the state legislature. One of the most significant things, and this goes a little bit with why I'm running as an independent right now, is if you look at the party system in this country today, the party system is really, really broken. It's like the left doesn't want to work with the right doesn't want to work with the left. All the years I served in the General Assembly, I was able to cross the aisle and work. In my case, I was a Republican representative. I was able to work successfully with the Democrats in the General Assembly. And I pride myself to say that I left there after 16 years with a lot of Democratic friends that to this day I socialize with. It didn't necessarily mean we agreed on issues, but what we did do is we had a mutual respect for each other so that we would listen to the concerns of each other and we would evaluate it in that way. I've been a lifelong businessman. I've been in 3 different areas of business. I ran a service company which was security and alarm protection and door access and cameras and all that sort of stuff. I did that for over 40 years. I was in the retail business. I had a chain of musical instrument stores called Keyboard 88. I don't know if any of you remember back in those days. We had a store in Providence, Warwick, North Kingstown. And so I was in the retail industry, the service industry, and then I ran a manufacturing company where I sold marine products that I invented and patented. Those were products that were used all over the country. Different inventions. One was a boat lift to carry inflatable boats in back of a large boat. But having been a lifelong boater, I have a great deal of respect for our bay. And I can tell you, it needs to be cleaned up a little more. But what I have seen in our bay, especially in our upper bay, is that it is the cleanest that it's been in a long time. And a lot of that would probably be due to the fact of the facility that was built years ago to house the sewage of Providence. While being a boater, back, I guess it was around 2006, we had a big fish kill. I don't know if any of you remember it on the bay, but a lot of boaters were being blamed for dumping raw sewage into the bay. And one of the things that I did was I passed legislation, which was landmark legislation. It was copied by other states, whereby every boat that had a toilet in it needed to be certified that it had the ability to hold its sewage. And to this day, that certification program is still in effect. So I've been very concerned about what happens to our environment. I have been outspoken about the power plant in Burrillville for a variety of different reasons. I think they already have a power plant, and I'm not sure that we should force things into communities that are so upset about having something like a power plant put into the community if there's viable options. Back in 2008 and 2009, I supported the original Deepwater Wind project. And it was a very controversial project at the time. They were going to build 5 wind turbines off Block Island. It was sold as an experimental project to see what the efficiency level would be of actually generating electricity off the open ocean. So it was a whole variety of different things that were gonna kick in. What was the cost factor of doing the construction, how efficient was it gonna be in terms of wind production. And at the time, they put a high price tag on the kilowatt charge per hour. But it was only gonna represent 1% of the power that was generated to the entire state of Rhode Island, and it had a negligible effect on any of the costs of electricity. I supported that program, knowing that the next step was going to be to open up a larger wind farm that would generate a substantially larger amount of electricity, and that proposal is way underway right now, and we're scheduled to build 50 wind turbines off of, I say off of Block Island, but it's off of the Cape, it's off of Block Island. It's about 30 miles off of Newport, so it's well out of the distance that you would ever be able to see it. But the capability would be that it could generate about 20% of the actual power that the state of Rhode Island needs. And I think it's a good first step in renewable energy. It has the least amount of effect on the environment. There have been concerns by the fishermen, and we want to make sure that the fishermen are taken care of with their concerns, and Deepwater Wind has assured me that they are going to do everything they can to work with the fishing industry. But the bottom line is we have this great opportunity to generate this amount of power that it's like, you know, it's like we could almost become energy independent on our own if we had more of these resources to generate power. I support a lot of the solar projects that are happening throughout the state. I do not support the ones where they're taking down substantial amounts of acreage for trees and things like that. I don't want to see that happen. So I think I've been out there on a lot of environmental issues. Where I'm different from the other two candidates in this race, and I'm going to go off in another direction, is I'm an outspoken guy. I tell it the way it is. You ask me a question, I give you the answer. If you don't like what I say, I'm just giving you an honest answer. Other politicians always sugarcoat their answer so that you never know where they stand. With me, you always know where I stand. You ask me a question, I try to give you as much of an answer as I can possibly give you. And I think that is something that's sorely needed in politics today. You know, it's easy to run for office and make 9,000 promises and do one. It's real easy. And a lot of people go on, what is your platform, what are you gonna do? So it's like we have a bouquet of flowers that we picked. We got roses, we got daffodils, we got all these flowers in this bouquet. And today I hand you out, oh, here's your flower that you wanted because of your issue. Here's another flower to you, another flower to you. Get elected, all these flowers are dead. And a lot of the promises that the politicians make, they're dead. They did and said exactly what they thought they needed to do and say in order to get elected. That's not me. That's not me. It will never be me. I'm a fighter. I fight when I believe I'm right. I fight for the taxpayers. I have fought vehemently for the taxpayers on the House floor on many occasions. And, you know, I was known as being a lion in the House. I would take that same energy level that I have and the fact that I'm not running for governor because I've raised millions of dollars from all the special interests that are consuming everything that's wrong with government. You know, if you're a lobbyist for one issue, could be the drug companies, the insurance companies, could be the specific union, it could be a variety of different special interests. What the lobbyists do is they go out and they raise $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 for a candidate. And technically, they bought that candidate. That candidate will always be more accountable to those special interests than they will be to you, the taxpayers. I'm funding this campaign myself. I haven't taken any money from any lobbyists. And what I like to say is, you know, I'm not going to be putting millions of dollars in this race, But I've put a substantial amount of money in, and I believe that if people believe in somebody, will work for them and not for the special interest, I don't see how you could vote for anybody else but myself. I'm ready to take questions if anybody wants to ask me a question.
Yeah, question from an Audubon member. How can coastal Rhode Island towns climate change, and how will your administration help them?
A variety of different things could be done. One of them is we're relying on the federal government to give us the major laws that we need to have to protect our environment on a federal level. We can't stop the effects of global warming just by passing laws in Rhode Island. That's impossible. But what we can do is we can put programs in place that allow us to go in, if you're in a low-lying area and the results are you're going to be underwater in X amount of years, afford you an opportunity to sell your property at a fair market value and take that property then and turn it into open space. So I would look to put a program in place that could do that. We're not going to be able to hold back the bay. That's not possible. But what is possible also would be to stop power plants from dumping superheated water into the bay, which is bringing the temperature of the bay up. So how do you do that? You want to be a power plant, you want to dump your water in the bay, and we have it in several different locations. And some of it's upstream. I would make it so that they would have to cool their water to a level where it's not going to affect the water that they're dumping into the bay.
How would you fund or how would the state fund, buying people's property essentially if they wanted to sell?
Well, it's not going to, all of a sudden everybody's not going to turn out and want to sell their waterfront property. It's going to be over a period of time. I think you're going to get the absolute low-lying people who right now, if we have a storm, the water is ending up in their living room. And those are the people that we need to buy out first. And this is going to be a gradual process. If it can't be reversed on a national level and on a global level, we need to have this contingency plan in place. Let me tell you something. A lot of people say, how would you spend this, how would you spend that? In 2015, the Rhode Island budget was $8.4 billion. Today, that budget is $9.6 billion. That's $1.2 billion more. Do you see it? Because I don't see it. It's being squandered. It's being squandered through inefficiency and incompetent leadership. That's why it's being squandered. What I want to do is I want to go in and put Arlene Violet in as an inspector general and have her go into the government and see where there's a lot of waste and fraud. We have departments of government that were put in place, people were put in place to do jobs that aren't necessary to be done anymore, yet nobody goes in there and does efficiency levels to see maybe those people would be better serving the state if we put them in another department. That's the kind of thing that I would do, especially as a businessman. I was a businessman all my life. When you're in your own business, every dollar you spend is going to count for at least a minimum of $1. And in government, when you spend $1, you're lucky if you get 10 cents out of that dollar.
What's your take on the proposed LNG facility on the Providence South Side that's going to impact two pretty stressed neighborhoods at the moment?
Again, I'm not going to support anything that's going to stress out a community. I think if it's going to stress out the community, we shouldn't push it forward. I think it's important that we have enough LNG on hand, and we need to look at that. I've been insured by the people that drive these boats up and down in the inner waters, that they're double-hulled ships that carry them. But the bottom line is, if it's going to affect the community, like the Burrowville Power Plant, I think we have enough alternatives to use other than kind of forcing stuff into the neighborhoods.
And looks like the second page of my comments, but I think I can just talk to you. I left the first page in the car. I'm delighted to be here with you, and I appreciate that you're making the time to do this. I will say, on a personal level, I'm deeply grateful for all that the Audubon Society has done for Rhode Island. On many, many Sunday afternoons, you'll find my family and I in Smithfield, walking the trails, the Audubon trails there, and often we're also out in Seekonk. And when we're there, we feel very lucky to be able to walk and enjoy the trails and watch the birds. And it reminds me, I do it as a mother because it's important for my kids, but it reminds me as a governor how important it is for us to treasure and preserve all of our natural space. And especially in a place like the Ocean State, I think we have even more of an obligation to preserve what we have. I would say that in my time as governor, the thing that I have been most focused on as it relates to these issues is meeting the needs of and demands and challenges of climate change. As far as I'm concerned, we have to act as urgently as possible to confront the challenges of climate change. So what does that mean? What have we done and what does that mean? I'm very proud, twice since I've been governor, to put into my budget open space green economy bonds. I see the vote yes on 3 signs out there. That's very good. That's the second one that I proposed. I put the first one in my very first year as governor, and then again, sorry, my second year, and then again this year. That is and I'll continue to do that if reelected. I'll continue to do that. These are investments in parks, open space, wastewater treatment, resiliency, stormwater. It's bike paths, recreational paths. It's a smart investment. We ought to continue to do it. Related to that, I'm proud to be the governor that appointed the state's first ever resiliency officer. We have a full-time person whose full-time job it is to think about resiliency. And earlier this year, I put forth the state's first ever statewide resiliency plan. Again, we know climate change is real. We know we have 400 miles of coastline. Let's get to work making our coast resilient, worrying about clean water, stormwater, wastewater, beach erosion, and coming up with a plan, and the state supporting that effort and investing in that infrastructure. I also created by executive order, I created the Outdoor Recreational Council. In fact, it's so important to me and my husband that my husband Andy, the first gentleman, chaired that along with Janet Coit, who's amazing. And they came up with some terrific proposals that we are in the process of working on. Second thing that I've been focused on as it relates to climate change is just moving us as fast as possible to renewables. When I became governor, I said I would like to have our energy source be 10 times as clean as it is now by 2020. We are on path to do that. It's an aggressive goal. Since I've been governor, we're about 3 times as clean, producing 3 times more green energy, and we're going to get to that 10 times goal. I think we could be the first state in the country to have 60 or 70% of all of our energy be green. And I think we ought to keep going until it's 100%. How do we do that? We're participating in RGGI, and I supported increased stringency around the standards for that cap and trade program. I signed an executive order leading by example, saying that the state is going to commit to using less energy. I set a 10% goal. We are more than 15%. Cleanest energy is the energy you'll never use. We're supporting solar, and with the special incentive around brownfields and open space. And I'm extremely conscious of the tension between moving to solar and wind quickly, but also not cutting down all our forests in the meantime. And so, we can have that discussion. And then, of course, deep water wind is a game changer. I'm proud to be the governor, the only governor in America, actually, who can say that we have an offshore wind farm. And earlier this year, I announced that a big, huge announcement. We participated in we're going to procure 400 megawatts of offshore wind renewable energy. And we will continue to do everything we can to move that forward. That really is truly a game changer because that achieves the twin goals of affordability and is 100% clean. I will say, I'm a firm believer that you don't have to choose between being pro-business and pro-environment. You can do both, and we are doing both. In the process of doing everything that I just described, we've also created more than 10,000 green economy jobs. Since I've been governor, we've seen a 72% increase in green economy jobs. The wind farm alone will create thousands of jobs. The fact that we are the birthplace of the offshore wind industry I could talk all day about the benefits of that to our environment, but also to job creation. If we continue to grow that, as I know that we will, it is my vision for Rhode Island to have that industry based here so that not only do we have the direct jobs that you see now of servicing the wind farms, installing the wind farms, ferrying people to and from there, which is a lot of jobs. Over time, my administration and I are working very hard to make sure that we have as many jobs as possible in Rhode Island related to that industry. All the supply chain. Why shouldn't we be making the turbines here? Why shouldn't we be assembling the turbines here? Why shouldn't we have the world's leading experts in undersea exploration and oceanography and engineering? I think we can and we should and we will, and I think that's tens of thousands of jobs over time. The last thing I'll say is this, and I don't know how my time is doing, but in addition to being proactive in the ways that I've just described, it's also part of my job as your governor to stop things that I think are bad for Rhode Island, and 2 minutes, bad for Rhode Island and bad for our environment. What am I talking about? When President Trump said he's open to drilling off the coast for oil off the coast of Rhode Island, I got on a plane and I went down and I sat in the Secretary of Interior's office on a Sunday afternoon, kind of a bizarre meeting, which we could talk about when we have more time. And I made it crystal clear that we, the people of Rhode Island, opposed that and would do everything within our power to prevent that from happening. When the president pulled out of Paris Climate Accord, I signed an executive order committing Rhode Island to the standards that were set out there. Take that I'm kidding. And I will continue to do that and continue to oppose the president in every way that I can. If he tries to water down regulations federally, Janet Coy and my directors will do everything we can to shore up those regulations here. It is a very scary time with this president in the White House. By the way, it's not just the environment. And I promise you I will always do everything in my power to protect our way of life, to protect our bay, which is cleaner than it's been in decades, to protect our coastline, to protect our air quality, to protect our birds from him. Final thing is, I also killed that horrible biomass bill last year. I don't know if anyone here if you guys were super involved in that, but I've learned, now that I've been governor for a few years, I learned that when the governor says, if you send it to me, I'll veto it, it has a way of not passing. So when they were working on the biomass bill with the incineration, I sent the signal publicly and privately, if you send that to my desk, I'll veto it. It never got to my desk. So why do I mention that? Because last thing I'll say is we need to continue to work together to meet the challenges of climate change and protect what we love in Rhode Island, and to be proactive in doing that. But considering the threats that are coming our way from all different areas, I want you to know that I'll be a governor who says no to things that I think are harmful to the values that we share. So I'm on. Yes, of course, sorry.
This is a long one, so be patient. The question is from an Audubon member. The City of Providence has proposed monetizing the Providence water supply. What will your administration do to ensure state residents have safe, affordable, and sustainable drinking water now and in the future, and that the forest land around the Situate Reservoir remains protected?
Yes, thank you. So let me say a few things about that. The first thing is, I would oppose any effort to privatize a water supply. I think it scares me. From examples of what I've seen in other cities and states around the country, we have some of the cleanest, best drinking water in America, and we can't do a single thing that puts that at risk. And so I would oppose any effort to privatize a water supply, because I think it's an unnecessary risk and could degrade the quality of our water. If they want to look at regionalization options that don't involve privatization, it makes me nervous, but I would say I have to, be open to it and give them a chance to bring forth a thoughtful proposal. But here's what I would insist on. And I'm a Providence resident, by the way. I think a lot of this is driven by Providence residents feeling like they pay very high taxes, the fiscal situation is very difficult in Providence, the pension systems are deeply underfunded, so I am sympathetic to that. And by the way, Providence represents about half of the state's GDP. So even if you don't live in Providence, it is very definitely true that so goes Providence, so goes Rhode Island. So I think we have to be aware of their fiscal financial situation, but I could never allow anything to happen that would even have the slightest risk of degrading the quality of our water. So what I would insist on is if the mayor wanted to put forth a proposal, it would have to be vetted through a very long, very public, statewide vetting process. Because this would have an impact on ratepayers. It would have an impact on everybody's water bill, not just the people of Providence. And so I guess, how would I answer it? I would say I'm skeptical, but you'd have to give the mayor a chance to put forth a proposal, I think, before rejecting it outright.
And how is your position on the Invenergy power plant? Does it remain the same? Has it changed?
Yeah,
I know you get asked this a lot.
No, I do get asked it a lot, and I'm happy to be asked it because it's important. It's a big deal and it's important. My position is the same. My position is that we need to move as fast as possible to a fully renewable, fully green grid. In this instance, there is a process. The EFSB, it's a siting board process. It's been going on for almost 2 years, and I trust that process. The process is designed to take into account, do we need it? By the way, if I can continue to move as fast as we are to cheap offshore wind, it changes the equation of whether we need it, and the siting board has to take that into account, and I have faith that they will take that into account. It takes into account water quality issues for the people of Burrillville. It takes into account environmental and habitat considerations in Burrillville. So, and I don't want to put Janet in a weird spot because she is on the siting board. I was going to say she has more power than I do in this because she actually has a vote. My view is I'm not going to ram my decision through. I trust the process and I'll respect the outcome that they come up with.